I'm a Christian, and I believe that God places us in different phases of our lives for different reasons. And so the biggest dream I have is to be able to meet my calling or my purpose.
Hello and welcome to the Ndini podcast. I'm Sandra Chuma. Every week, I'm bringing you conversations with bold, inspiring, trailblazing, and influential women of African descent. These are women from all walks of life, women who are entrepreneurs, artists, social activists, athletes. Each one of them, in their own way, is changing the narrative on what it means to be an African woman. They'll be telling us about their journeys and sharing their secrets to success. And I hope that by hearing their inspiring stories, you will be inspired. Hey, Dr. Nina.
How are you?
I'm fantastic. How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
First of all, I'm so grateful. Thank you so much for making time. I interviewed Apathy, several months ago, and she had said to me, oh my gosh, you absolutely have to interview this amazing woman. So I have to thank Apathy for the introduction and for connecting us.
I thank her too, because I was going through your website and I read about a few of the other women that you've highlighted, and I thought, wow, this is phenomenal. Like, how have I never heard about this?
Oh, thank you so much. It's definitely a work in progress. I'm loving it. My gosh, it's the most amazing thing because I get to talk to amazing women like you.
Thank you. Thanks.
So why don't we actually start with, I didn't even do you the courtesy of introducing you. So why don't you start out by kind of telling anybody who's listening who doesn't know who you are and what you do, who you are and what it is you do.
Thank you, Sandra, for having me on your podcast. I'm Nina Lum. I'm a Cameroonian, born and raised in Cameroon, and I currently practice hospital medicine, though of course I'm board certified in family medicine. I live and work in Kentucky, and I've lived in the States for approximately 10 or 11 years now.
So you say you live in the States, or you lived in the States for 10 or 11 years. Where were you from originally?
So I'm from Cameroon. That's in West Africa. And I moved from Cameroon to study medicine. That was my big driving force for leaving the country. But I didn't move directly to the States. I actually moved to the Caribbean because I went to Caribbean medical school. So the process was as such. I attended boarding school back home, which is what we call secondary and high school education. Completed that, attempted to go into medical school there. That at the time, there was just one medical school in the country, and they only took a set number of people each year, and I did not make that cut. So at that point, I started looking into undergraduate programs. That was in 2004. And so during that process, I realized this is not what I wanted to do. I still wanted to pursue my dream of becoming a physician. And in that process, I came across pre-medical programs in the Caribbean. And they were sort of synchronized into their medical curriculum. And I applied into one of them in Curacao. And while in Curacao, then with meeting other students from the States who had moved down to the Caribbean for medical school, I started to realize that the Caribbean system was very much intersected with the U.S. system. I finished the pre-med program at St. Martinez in Curacao and transitioned into the medical school program, which was sort of a divided program where they pursued basic sciences are pursued on the island and then the clinical years in the States. And so that's how I ended up moving to the States, was to pursue third and fourth year clinicals of medical school. And while in the States doing my third and fourth year clinical rotations, I began to apply into residency programs. And which brings us back to what we were talking about before, was how and why I chose Kentucky. It was really based out of the fact that I had a limited number of programs that would typically sponsor a foreign national into residency training, and that's how I stumbled upon University of Kentucky. They had a great rural program. It met with what I always envisioned as a young girl in Cameroon, being a rural doctor, and so that's how I ended up in Kentucky, really.
Going right back to when you were a young child growing up in Cameroon, like when did you know you wanted to be a doctor? Was it something you always knew you wanted to be, or when did you get bitten by the medical bug?
For me personally, my mother is a pediatrician in Cameroon right now. And so I grew up in a household where, I was just talking to someone about this as a kid, at night you'll have someone knock at the door with a sick child. And it didn't matter what time of the night it was. This was before cell phones. So it's just a matter of like go out and see who is knocking or ringing the bell. And you'll have, people would bring their children in after hours to see the doctor because maybe they had a fever at night or, something happened out of a sudden and, they're needing help. And over time, my mom had built this small clinic. It was just what you call an outpatient center to start to accommodate the needs of the community. And so, in a sense, I was shadowing her without necessarily knowing that that's what was happening, and so the desire to just, every young girl grows up wanting to be like their mother. And so I think that desire was just slowly ingrained in me because I could see how much benefit she was offering the community. And, it's one of those things where, they'll bring the child in that night. She'll do whatever she needs to get done. A week later, we'll meet them at the market and that kid is running around and the moms are just like, oh, my God, you saved my child's life. Or, if it wasn't for you, we wouldn't be here right now. Or at church the following Sunday, the kid runs up to her and they look fine. And so just those moments were kind of like the first moments that made me realize, there's some meaning in being a doctor and you can actually really help people if you do that. And that's a very simple way of saying it, but that's really how I thought about it as a young girl.
And so what was that journey like? So you have a desire, you're a young kid, but I'm sure there must have been challenges along the way. I mean, you talked about not getting into medical school. Like, what were some of the biggest challenges you faced leading up to you actually starting medical school?
Oh, goodness. What was not a problem is the true question. There were so many challenges. Sometimes I believe that they all happen for a reason because looking back, I can see how every one of those have served me in a good way. But at the time, it did not feel like that. I think the first thing which I share with a lot of other immigrants that have pursued what we'll call, higher education or more competitive degrees and things like that was financial problems. As far as it takes a lot for a person earning a menial salary back home, such as our parents did back in the day, to sponsor a child in another country where the exchange value for their currencies, is negligible.
And also, I'm going to guess typically as well where you're paying foreign student fees in addition to the regular fees, right?
In addition. Right. So that was a big challenge. I remember the decision for me to go study medicine abroad came at the expense of my brother not having the opportunity to study out abroad because my parents could not afford for both of us to do that. So it's like, well, who's going to go first? Well, the older kid's going to go first. And that was the mindset that was necessary for them to survive. And so that was the first big challenge. The second big challenge was actually getting the academic opportunities to line up with the law. And by this I mean, as a student, after not getting into medical school in Cameroon, I started to apply into schools across the world. I applied to schools in Nigeria, Italy, the United Kingdom, the US. It was whatever it took to get that MD. That's what I was ready to do. And so in that process, I actually got approved for several different schools in several different countries. But I remember getting admission into Temple University for a Plan B, which was pharmacy, to pursue a degree in pharmacy. And I got admission into pre-pharmacy at Temple University in Philadelphia. And I remember going in for my interview and getting declined a student visa. And so that was sort of something I did not expect, because I felt like, well, I've met the academic requirements to study there, but then the law doesn't seem to tie in, or the opinion of the law doesn't seem to tie in with or agree with the fact that I should pursue that degree. And that was heartbreaking, because it was, after plan A of medical school in Cameroon not working out, plan B of, I'm going to venture out into the pharmaceutical world, doesn't work out. And then plan C, which was like, okay, then go pursue medicine in some other country. I remember I started taking lessons in Italiano just so that I could finally go to Italy and do medical school there. And that during that process of taking Italian lessons is when I fell on the Caribbean opportunity. So in a sense, it's hard when you actually miss out on plan A, and then you start to push towards plan B. And then the challenges that I encountered in pursuit of plan B were very different from what I encountered in pursuit of plan A. At that point, it wasn't you did not perform optimally academically on the entrance exam for medical school. It was now, well, even though you've been granted admission, you can't go for such and such reasons as stipulated by the law of the United States at the time. And so then the plan C, I have to learn a new language to go to medical school. And so I start to do that. Effectively, while in Cameroon, I started to learn the Italian language, and then in the process, I was like, well, maybe it's time to have a plan D just in case I encounter another challenge like the two previously unexpected ones. And in the process of doing that, got admitted into pre-pharmacy. They accepted my credits from the university in Cameroon that I was a part of, and so that worked out a lot smoother than the other three. And so I thought, plus it's pre-med. It's what I've always wanted to do. It's going to give me that opportunity to finally get into medical school. So I took it. And that's the two main challenges that I encountered. And then I would say the third one wasn't much of a challenge, but now I guess being older, I realized it was a challenge, but it was my mindset and not having the proper, I guess the things I know now about success and about life and about the rewards of hard work and determination and the power of networking is something that I developed through these challenges. But I wish I had that earlier on, because my approach or my reaction to those challenges would have been a lot different if I did have that. But that's just something that you acquire over time. You kind of just have to learn as you go.
I actually was going to comment, and it's interesting that you would talk about your mindset and, as you're saying, oh, I wish it was something that I'd had back then. But I was actually going to comment on during the challenges that you're going through, you had that mindset, because the fact that you would even think, okay, plan A, okay, I need to do a plan B, plan C, I'm learning Italian now, to keep going, to not feel like this is the end and just give up. That took something really special. So where did that come from?
I don't know. I wish I had some great answer, but I think the example that I saw in our household is where it came from. So moving to the West, watching the parent-children interaction, and comparing it to the interaction that we were raised in between our parents and ourselves, I noticed that the missing link is communication. And the way that people are trained to communicate with their children involves a lot more verbal cues and affirmations and very direct language, with when you want to raise your kid in the open quote right way. But back home, it was a lot more indirect communication, where we witnessed our parents practice, and I witnessed my mother's character, and I witnessed her hard work, and I witnessed her work ethic. I witnessed her survival skills. I witnessed her motherhood and her parenting skills. It wasn't so much, I'm going to tell you that I am being a good parent right now. as much as I just had to sit there and watch her life unfold to realize that she was being tenacious, she was being hardworking, she was being purposeful, she was being determined. It was never that she stood up and told me, I'm determined to raise you right. I'm going to work hard to raise you right. No, it wasn't that. It was, I watched her do these things. And through that, I feel like there was an inherent transfer of character to me and my brothers, to where we didn't have to be told what to do as much as we had watched and lived with an example for so long with our mother and our father, that we had no choice but to emulate that. And it was just being emulated in a different fashion in my pursuit to medical school. So I think that's where that came from.
And what would you say is the greatest lesson that you learned from your mother?
I think in a way she was trying to tell us to find our perfect harmony in everything that we do or did. Because when I think about that, it makes me realize, well, you can do what you set yourself to do if you work hard, but you also need to realize that there's going to be, you're going to be placed within certain confinement, or you're going to be placed within certain, you're going to meet restriction, but it's up to you to decide how much you're going to allow that to restrict you. And so I think those are the big lessons that she taught us, was there's a lot you can do. You will meet and encounter difficulties. You will be restricted to a certain degree, succumb to it, but never be oppressed by it. And give yourself the chance to dream outside of that and to be adventurous despite of that.
That's very profound. That is really beautiful. Going back to your story and going back to the journey to you becoming Dr. Nina. So you applied to school, you get accepted, you're now in medical school. What happened next?
During medical school was fun. I enjoyed it. I mean, I wanted it. I had wanted it so bad and for so long that nothing else seemed to matter. So in a sense, that struggle made it easier for me to cope through the most difficult days. I would tell myself, well, this is what you've wanted. This is what you were made for. And so at that point, it was just a complete shift to where it's like, I'm going to find a way out. I'm going to find a way to pass this thing, whatever it takes, because I've wanted it for so long that I'm not going to sit here and complain about how difficult it is, but I'm just going to find a way to make it work for me. And so I enjoyed medical school. I mean, I didn't have a whole lot, but it was a great experience. Right up until it was time to apply into residency, which is our postgraduate training. And then at that point, it became a decision again of building the finances for that and finding a program that would agree to sponsor me as a foreign medical graduate and train me to that effect. And so I then encountered another roadblock, which was, selecting programs to which I qualified for, which was a short list, and trying to find the perfect fit for myself, especially in a culture where I had no prior experience with, as far as when it came to the medical side of things. I'd only spent 3 years in the States prior to when it was time for me to apply into residency. So I didn't have that perspective that I have now, having lived here, close to 10 years. And looking back, I could have made a lot of different choices, but I had no better knowledge at the time. So it didn't affect me in any way because I didn't know any better. But now, looking back, I would say if I had a deeper perspective of the medical system, I would have made different choices. But at the time, I feel like given the restrictions of my student visa, I found just what was necessary for me at the end of the day.
And so you talk about being a foreign student and, some of the financial challenges, perhaps some of the limitations. What were some of the other things that made you really feel that you were an immigrant in the medical school system?
Well, I remember being very sensitive about the way I pronounced certain things, and I remember being asked to repeat myself a few times when talking to patients, and that was distressing because I just felt like I knew my medical knowledge, and now there was some misunderstanding between what I was trying to communicate to my patients. I just told myself I didn't want to deal with it. But then what I didn't realize was I was not giving myself the optimal learning opportunity by caving in just because I didn't want to stand out every time I talked. And so that took some growth in realizing that I'm always going to sound different. I'm never going to fit in the way I sound and the way I pronounce certain words, because I'll always have, everybody has an accent, and I'll always have some type of an accent, whether I want it or not. So I had to take myself away from it and ensure that my message was being properly delivered one way or the other. And so there was a sense of never fitting in, so to speak, because I mean, you just always stand out. You know, I would find myself in encounters where the conversation would just quickly shift from what was important, as far as, you know, if I was talking to a patient about something medical, and then, you know, oh, you know, where are you from? Or you sound different. And then that would shift that conversation to talking about my origin, which is great. But there's some clinical scenarios where it's not important. You know, it's not. I always look at it like, I'm here to serve you. I'm here to take care of you medically, and let's focus on that and get you feeling better. And so having to navigate those scenarios where the attention is shifted from the primary clinical concern and the purpose of the clinical visit to the fact that I am different, having to learn the skills to maneuver those types of scenarios and always bring that conversation back to what's important. It wasn't necessarily a challenge, but it was something I had to learn to do those first few years. And then, you know, moving and working and practicing in the South, you know, the common concept is people, you know, they've made a lot of progress, but there's still some element of racism to expect, or some element of discrimination that still exists. And so coming in with that mindset made me very defensive in the beginning. But then after having lived here so long, you realize that those biases exist everywhere, even in Cameroon, where I'm from. I mean, there's always some element of inherent bias. And I had to learn to treat people just the way I want to be treated myself, irrespective of how I felt about their stand on bias, or if there was discrimination involved in our interaction, or if there was racism involved in our interaction. And I would say that there have been very few scenarios where that has actually occurred, but I would say it's not as prevalent as it was put out to be before I started practice. And so that's another thing that I've learned to overcome and learn to move past. And it almost appears as if learning to deal with it almost makes it go away, because you don't encounter it as much as you thought you think you would when you actually learn to maneuver that.
Dr. Nina, what's your biggest dream for yourself?
That is a loaded question. The biggest dream that I have for myself, I think it's multifaceted. I am a Christian, and I believe that God places us in different phases of our lives for different reasons. And so the biggest dream I have is to be able to meet my calling or my purpose. And that in itself has a medical component to it, which is advancing the lives of the patients that I take care of with medicine, improving access to health care in Cameroon. And then there's a familiar component to it, which is being there and present for my family and being able to take care of them. And then there's a spiritual component to it, which is wanting to achieve that which the Lord has set out for me to do, whether it's in ministry, in medicine, or with my family.
That's an interesting answer in the context as well of I was on your blog and I noticed that you've divided your blog into three distinct sections, that there's a God, a medicine, and an in-between. So how does that align with where your vision of where you're going and your dream for yourself?
So I really dream of being able to intersect all the parts of my life into my career. So by that I mean, when I take care of a sick person, I want to be able to cater to not only their physical healing, but their emotional and spiritual healing that has to occur in that person's life if given the opportunity. Of course, I don't impose my beliefs on anyone else. And then to that same effect, we cannot ignore how our lifestyle choices affect our health and our wellness. It's evidence, stress alone, right? It's one of the number one leading causes of some of the ailments that people experience on a daily basis. And then that trickles down into how they make lifestyle choices, and that trickles down into how they think about the lifestyle choices that they're making. And then before you know it, you have a birth of diseases that could have been very well preventable if that person had a more disciplined lifestyle that incorporated a certain amount of dieting and a certain amount of exercise and a certain amount of well-being, such as self-care directed activities, and a certain amount of balance, whether it was a spiritual balance or an emotional balance, which in itself has benefit for mental health and well-being. So I really dream of a career in medicine that would allow me to intersect all these different parts of my life into one, whether it's serving in a setting where I have a practice that caters to this holistic vision of human life, or whether it centers in a career where I have a practice that allows me the opportunity to be an influencer and an educator for people to be able to make better choices for their lifestyles by transforming their mindset in a manner that is advantageous to them, and facilitates them to pick those right choices for them as an individual. I think that that's a better way to take care of a human being than to just have to write a prescription for every problem that I see in the office.
Now, you're in a profession that is notorious for its lack of balance. How have you been able to maintain balance given the busyness of your life? And I follow you on social media, so I know that you're someone who's very, very fit and looks amazing. So how have you been able to balance that with your career?
I think, during residency training, we don't get a lot of time for ourselves. And so coming out of residency, I made a conscious decision that I was going to prioritize my health and wellness as much as my clinical practice, because I've had to learn the hard way that if I didn't take care of myself, I was never going to be able to take care of other people. And I like to be my own sort of guinea pig in the things that I believe in and the things that I advocate for when it comes to health and wellness. And so it's taken discipline and prioritizing my self-care as an arena to offer better patient care. And whether that requires me scheduling time for physical activity, which is probably the best thing to do, it's premeditated. Because just like everything else in life, you have to make time for it. Otherwise, you're never going to have time for it. So once you have to determine something is going to become a priority, just like sleeping or eating or going to work is a priority. Well, my physical wellness has to become a priority. And then to that same regard, I make it a point to schedule time where I am not working and I'm able to participate in what I call recentering activities, whether that's traveling, reading, seeking out a new adventurous experience, or adventurous sports or something of that nature. But I do that as an arena to allow myself to detach from my primary work and my primary purpose, which is that medical pathway. So I think it requires discipline and intention and consciously making those decisions on a daily basis. I always say, small, deliberate actions bring about huge change. So it's sort of a daily thing. It's a daily process where each day I'm going to make time out to meditate. I'm going to make time out to eat and to sleep and to care for my patients. With that same intentionality, I also exercise that with being intentional about self-care and time away from work and time to participate in such recentering activities.
So let's switch gears a little bit. You talked about, as part of your self-care, reading books. Now, something that I know about you is that in addition to being Dr. Nina, you're also a published author. So tell me about the book that you recently wrote and published.
So there's 20 of us female physicians. We got together, pioneered by one of our colleagues, Dr. Robbins. And the purpose of this book was to share a medical biography in a way that would change the narrative around the perception of people, men and women alike, who pursue this highly demanding career in medicine. And we wanted to offer encouragement, motivation, inspiration, and support to any persons interested in a similar pathway. And so it's a nice storybook that is packed with information, real life experiences. It's titled The Chronicles of Women in White Coats. And each chapter is written by a separate author, and each chapter is very different, yet so similar to the next, because the theme across the book is empowerment, inspiration, motivation, encouragement, triumphs, trials, and how to overcome.
Can you tell me about the chapters that you wrote? Like, what were the titles of the chapters you wrote, and why did you write those particular chapters?
I wrote 2 chapters in the book, and the first chapter was titled Pride and Prejudice, and the second chapter was titled Self-Care is Better Patient Care. And Pride and Prejudice, I wrote that because of an experience that I had at work one day when I realized that I had some element of gender bias, even as a female physician myself. And it was sort of an awakening for me because I am very pro women. I'm a woman myself, and I use my social media to empower women. And here I was in a clinical situation that brought to light that I myself thought that most doctors had to be male. And with that, it helped me to realize that bias wasn't only something that I could expect of other people to inflict on me, but as much as myself and everyone else is liable to some element of it. And the work that needs to be done is that of changing that narrative within my mind before I can change the narrative for other people. And so with that realization, it gave me some more empathy for another form of bias that I'd experienced, which was more racial bias. And it allowed me to see myself in that person's shoes, or the person that was inflicting that level of bias to me. And it allowed me to develop a method around overcoming bias, and I wanted to share that in the book as well. That the true message with that is we're all liable to some form of it. We need to be introspective and mindful to search within ourselves to find it and intentionally work on it. It's never going to surface in our minds that, oh, yes, you have bias towards the Islamic religion, or you have bias towards female physicians, or you have bias towards foreign doctors, or you have bias towards people that do not look like you. It's never going to come to your head like an epiphany in that manner. It always takes asking introspective questions and working it up to the surface, and then addressing it by intentionally taking action to act in a manner that is different from what you are more likely to do. And then the second chapter was self-care is better patient care, and it just speaks on what we just talked about, which is finding balance in a highly demanding profession has to be intentional, because when we do find ways to take care of ourselves, we are better performers in the workplace, and we are better able to be of service and of high quality service to the people that we take care of when we are taken care of.
So we just talked about your book, which sounds very, very interesting. And I'm interested to, I'm actually going to find myself a copy because I'd love to hear what some of the other women had to say. Like, where were some of the other women from? How did you all come together?
So this book is quite interesting because there's such diversity in it. I love it. We all met through social media. And like I said, Dr. Robbins, who was a published author prior to this project, brought up the notion that we could get together and create a book that would unite all our purposes and put it in one book, because we all seem to have the same thought process in conversation on that physicians group. And so the project ended up having just 20 of us out of several hundreds that were interested. And the variety in it is amazing. So if you pick just the medical variety as far as the specialties that are represented, it runs anywhere from family medicine like myself, internal medicine, radiology, pediatrics, obstetrics, gynecology, surgery, orthopedic surgery. So you get that variety of people that have had to train in different specialties and the different challenges, which are not always uniform. They're similar, but not the same. And women that have had to train in these different specialties are represented in the book with their personal take on how they address those different roadblocks that they experienced. And then in that same book, what I really, really like was the cultural differences as well. I represented, Africa by being a Cameroonian author in the book. But then in that same book, you have women with origins from South Africa, origins in India, origins in different parts of Asia. And then, of course, you had, the core of the book, which is primarily mostly our American authors, and even those that had multiple backgrounds within them are all represented. So you get that perspective of more than one person, more than one religion, more than one woman, more than one specialty. And each of these people are sharing experiences that turn out to be so similar, to where it makes me realize this book is not only for doctors. This book is not only for physicians. It's for every woman that is wanting to find her place, whether as a homemaker or as a busy professional, or as a mother and a busy professional, or as a CEO of her home or a CEO of a company. The themes are the same. In that book, you read stories on imposter syndrome, which is where a person may feel like a fraud, which is very common in women that pursue really highly professional careers. In the same book, there's a chapter called Titles, which is an ER physician, Dr. Perez, talking about having to maneuver different titles as a veteran, as a mom, as a physician, as an immigrant, as a Hispanic female. And so all of these themes mesh in the very same book. In that book, you read about people trying to find their voice in medicine and how they chose the careers that they picked and how they were able to formulate that plan. You read about failure. Failing an exam is such a difficult thing for any doctor. I mean, it's so competitive that when you fail, you almost feel like a loss. And so, there's chapters that are geared towards maneuvering failure and using fear as fuel for success. And I mean, it's just jam-packed with pearls for just about anyone who considers themselves to be a high achiever or who has big dreams and hopes for their future. There's just a lot of inspiration and motivation in that one book. I wish I had it when I was in medical school.
What are some of your favorite books or the best books that you've ever written or books that have really inspired you?
Oh, goodness, there's so many.
Okay, let's limit it to like top 3.
Top 3. The first one would be a very simple book called The Miracle Morning. It helped me gain discipline and insight as to how to manage the most important time of my day, which is my mornings. The second one is The Purpose-Driven Life, which was written by Rick Warren, and that has sort of been a go-to book for when I'm at odds with decision-making, because it recenters me to purpose and to sort of why I'm here and what on earth am I here for, and helps me answer that question each time. And the third book, which is a recent read, which is, I'm currently still reading it, it's called Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg, the Facebook CEO. It's a book on leading and women in the workplace, and it really speaks to reasons as to why every woman should seek to sit at the table of their career, of their lives, and why women should forge forward even amidst adversity and even amidst expectations and social and societal constructs. And I really enjoy it. I'm about done with it, and I feel like it's going to be a book that I'll definitely come back to time and time again.
And who are some women who inspire you?
So I would say my mother, Dr. Vicky Ngwa. I would say Oprah Winfrey, because who does she not inspire? I would say Folarunsho Olakija. I hope I said her name right. She's the richest woman in Nigeria currently, as far as I know. I admire her drive and the fact that she is one of those self-made people as well, and sort of the pursuit that she took to get to where she is currently.
Do you know, perhaps this may not be a true statistic anymore, but I remember reading not that long ago that she was actually the richest Black woman, like richer than Oprah, which I found interesting.
I did read that as well. And, I thought about that. I thought, well, if that's true, it's definitely very impressive. And I think it is true. Had been true at a certain point in time. I haven't really checked recently. But either ways, I mean, her success is so inspirational, because I think as an African woman, as a Cameroonian woman, there's not a lot, there are very few women that we have seen that have taken that international spotlight. And even by international, I mean even just within the continent, and talk less of outside of the continent. And I'm hoping that there'll be more of that in the future. And so when you get that one person or those two people, and there's probably many more African women that I am not familiar with who are doing that and so much more. But when you find that one person that you can relate to their story, and the fact that, they went to a boarding school just like me, and they started off going abroad to study just like me, which is the case of Mrs. Folarunsho, and reading her story and realizing there's so many similarities, and yet she made it. And so that is what we all aspire to be, and what I aspire to be is to take that which has been given to me and use it to an advantage in a way that would inspire other women like myself, and give them a bigger platform and give them a larger opportunity or even a larger vision. Because I've seen her vision, it gives me room to dream. And for that reason, I really admire her. And I mean, that's just the surface, right? Of course, Michelle Obama, her drive, and just her level of success as well is very inspirational to me. And there's just so many more. At this point, I'm thinking, whose name should I live out? Because there's...
And what's so exciting is that there are so many names. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to create this platform was, they're the names that we all are familiar with. But from an African perspective, it's just really sharing some of those names of women who we don't necessarily hear about, but like yourself, who are doing in their own way and in their own lives really phenomenal things. And so I'm so excited to be able to share stories like yours. And which leads me to ask you the question of what's the impact that you want to have on the world?
The impact I want to have on the world is I would want to see better quality healthcare delivered to the people who need it the most. And I plan on doing that by continuing to participate in healthcare delivery in impoverished areas of the world, whether it's in Cameroon or it's in southeastern Kentucky. Wherever I find myself, even in the future, whether I move to an urban area, eventually I would always want to actively participate in improving healthcare delivery in those types of regions. I do have the dream and the hope of opening up hospitals in Cameroon, particularly in the more rural, what we call in our villages, and using telemedicine to connect those rural hospitals to more advanced academic centers and hospitals in the States. So using technology as a route for healthcare delivery, for one, as with the primary goal of improving healthcare, just not basic healthcare, but quality healthcare that is likely to improve the quality of lives and the outcomes of people back home. And even while in the States, people that need it the most in those medically underserved areas and those rural areas, improving their access to that level of quality that you would get in the cities, in the big cities of the world.
What's the best advice you've ever been given?
The best advice, let's see which one I would share with you today, because there's just too many of them. But I would say that being intentional and practical. So when someone told me, I don't remember who it was, to be intentional and practical, that's probably the best thing anyone's ever told me, because here's why. The changes that I desire to see, whether in my personal life, in my career, and with my goals and objectives through life, they're not going to happen overnight. And such great changes always start with small, practical activity, such as it's a daily effort for me to get to that point of owning a telemedicine network or building a hospital that can help people in low resource settings, right? But it would take me today being effective in my current practice, learning what I need to learn about what I have in front of me, being an efficient, great physician at this point in time for today, to be able to have a cumulative experience by the end of this week that will serve me 5-10 years from now. So being intentional on a daily basis with what I want to do for today. Like when I wake up in the morning, what is the one thing that I have to do today to make me a better doctor for tomorrow? Or even just for my patients for today. And what do I need? What articles do I need to read today? What journals do I need to read? What kind of media do I have to expose myself to? What book am I going to read today? What exercise am I going to do at the gym today? What food am I going to put in my body today that would keep me here, effectively pursuing the same goal tomorrow? Because I believe that cumulatively over 1 year, over 2 years of being intentional and practical every single day would add up to produce the result and the outcome that I want for my life. So being practical and being intentional is probably the best way to achieve great results in the future.
And what are you most grateful for right now?
I am most grateful for health. I am grateful that I have no sickness in my body. I am grateful for the people in my life, my family, and And a lot of times I'm grateful for water. I know that sounds so cliche, but it's so true. I'm usually just grateful that there is water, there is food, that I have the basic things that I need for life. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to influence the health and wellness of all the hundreds and thousands of patients that I take care of. It's such a blessing to be able to do that and to impact people's lives on a very important level, which is with their health. And I'm grateful for mine as well.
Okay, so we're going to switch gears. Like, we're going to do one last thing, which is a super quick thing. And it's a quick fire round. So this one should go by really fast. I don't want you to think about it. I just want you to tell me the first thing that comes to mind. So I'm going to ask you some questions and just say the first thing that comes to mind. Okay?
Okay. All right.
All right. Describe yourself in 3 words.
Game changer, motivator, ambitious.
When you hear the word successful, who's the first person that comes to your mind?
Oprah Winfrey.
What's your favorite book?
My Bible.
Favorite gift to give?
A book.
Favorite gift to receive?
Love.
What's the favorite thing about the place you live right now?
The people.
Favorite item of clothing? Because I know you're a very stylish lady.
A white t-shirt.
Favorite time of day and why?
Sunset. It reminds me of love and God and the universe.
Name 2 people you'd like to have dinner with and why?
I would like to have dinner with Oprah and with Florence Shaw Lakija so I can pick their brains.
What's your favorite meal or thing to eat, speaking about dinner?
I like fish.
What can't you get through the day without?
Probably my phone.
And what is the screensaver on your phone?
A picture of my family, my mother, my brother, and my dad.
And what's your favorite app?
My bank app.
That's a good one. Other than your phone and your wallet, what do you carry with you every day?
I carry with me, a stethoscope, usually.
Well, you're fancy.
I know. I always have a stethoscope in my bag. I don't know why.
You never know when you might need it, right?
You just never know.
What's the favorite place that you've ever visited?
Curacao.
And what's the song that would be the theme song of your life?
You can have it all.
What's your worst habit?
Sleeping too much.
What do you wish you had more of in your life?
More love.
And what's a question that you wish people would ask you?
How may I help you today?
And how may I help you today?
Take this message to the world.
You've been absolutely awesome, Dr. Nina. Thank you so much for making time. I know you don't get much time off, so I know I'm squeezing into some of that precious off time that you have. Where can people find you, and where can people find more information about the book or buy the book if they're interested in the book?
Yes, we are on Amazon. Just type in The Chronicles of Women in White Coats. We're actually now an Amazon bestseller, so it's a great time to pick the book up. We are also on Barnes & Noble. And you can find us on our personal website called womeninwhitecoats.com. So www.womeninwhitecoats.com. You can order on there as well. We also have an ebook, which is also available on Amazon. And we're working on an audiobook currently. And we hope to be everywhere where books are sold in the near future.
And where can people find more information about you and follow your journey as you go along?
I have a blog online. It's called it's titled www.theencouragingdoc.com. And I'm also on Instagram at the same handle at theencouragingdoc.com, at theencouragingdoc.
I'm interested to know, actually, I was going to ask you about why you called yourself both on the blog and on Instagram, The Encouraging Doc.
I started the blog as a platform to mentor foreign medical graduates like myself who were encountering some of those challenges that we talked about earlier. And I thought that was a great way to showcase myself as someone that was wanting to motivate and encourage them towards their medical goal. And that's where the name came from. But over time, it has evolved into me coaching other people with health, wellness, mindset, and just throwing out an encouraging word through the day. And I've decided to keep it for now.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Nina. I'm going to ask you one last question. So this platform is called Ndini, which in my mother tongue means I am. And I so believe in the power of declaring who you are and anything that follows I am being what defines your destiny. So if I had to ask you to finish that sentence for me, I am.
I am Nina. I am Cameroonian, and I am a game changer in the healthcare industry.
You've been such a joy to talk to. Thank you so much, Dr. Nina. Have a great rest of your day.
You too.
You take care. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Ndini podcast. I don't take even a single listener for granted. As you know, my goal with this platform is to help shift and change the narrative on Africa, and in particular about African women. But I need your help to do that. Please subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or Stitcher. You can also follow us on SoundCloud. And please share. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to leave a review on iTunes. It helps me to bring great guests to the show, and it also helps others discover the podcast. And of course, I always want to hear from you. I'd love to hear your thoughts on my conversation with our guest today and what you took away from it or what inspired you. I'd also love to hear from you if you have suggestions for other women you think I should absolutely have on the show. Our handle on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook is @Ndini Media. Or you can reach out to me through our website, which is ndini.com. That's ndini.com. Until next time, I'm Sandra Chuma. Be well.